Hi, I'm Jackie Tantillo, and this is Should Have Listened to My Mother. Thank you for joining me. Before I introduce my guest, I wanted you to know that this episode of Should Have Listened to My Mother contains some graphic content that may be offensive to some of my listeners. However, there's also some very uplifting and optimistic topics that we are going to be covering. So don't just think it's all going to be doom and gloom. By no means the imagination is couldn't be further from the truth. We've spoken in past episodes about letting our past define us. I'm talking about repeating behavior from generation to generation. My guest's childhood was full of terror and abuse, mainly from her father. She lived with this fear until she moved out at 30 years old. But what role did her mother play in all of this? And what significant events helped her turn her life around for good? On her podcast, Breast Cancer Hero's Journey, Grace speaks to women about breast cancer and overcoming this in your life, how to have a fulfilling life with or after breast cancer. So I'm really excited to mix lessons learned with an optimistic future. Grace Angeli, welcome to Should Have Listened to My Mother.
Thank you. It's so great to be here. Thanks for having me.
And in case you can't figure out where Grace is from, she's joining us from Australia via Zoom. So it's really exciting to have you aboard.
Thank you so much. I hope my accent doesn't sound too masculine. Sometimes it can.
No, not at all. Let's explain your last name. De Angeli is absolutely beautiful. You are Italian-Australian, but you married a gentleman who's Italian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Funny story about that is, like you said, I'm what we considered first generation Australian. So both my parents migrated from Italy, from the south of Italy when they were both very young. They didn't know each other. They met here in Australia. But years later, obviously, I meet my husband, and I would always say to my mother, I'm never going to marry an Italian. And, when I said to her, I met someone, she's like, oh, well, they say if you spit in the air, it falls back in your face. But what I meant by that is I didn't want to marry an Australian Italian, someone like me, because, the thing is, I would say a very large number of, Australian Italians have not even stepped foot in Italy, but consider themselves Italian. And it's like, you've got it all wrong. When I met my husband, obviously, that's when I knew, well, that's what a real Italian is. And not this pretend Australian Italian. So that was quite funny. So yes, and he's from the north of Italy. So and we met, 21 years ago now.
He plays a significant role in your transition, your recovery from your past, right?
Absolutely. When I met my husband, they say, why do you meet someone? What's happening in your life? And at the time, like you explained in the introduction, I was in a family that was very abusive. My father would beat me most of the time, if not all the time. And I remember being in my bedroom, like we're talking the ages of 28, 29, crying, please, I just want to find someone that's going to make me happy. And, the internet first started and everything like that. And everyone was getting super excited because we can meet people from around the world. And that's when I met my husband. And from the moment we connected online, for me, it was like I had known him my whole life. So, and what it was is he was going through his transition. So his transition was about being tough exterior, being someone that didn't care, didn't love. Yet I saw those qualities in him. And in return, he saw the qualities of me that he's thinking, you're a pushover, you're someone you're going to be stepped over. And so he allowed me to find the courage within. And in return, I allowed him to see the love within himself. So that's where it all sort of started from there. So, I know it sounds like a cliche when you say the good girl, bad boy thing, but it was that. So he allowed me to understand what was happening in my life was not correct. He didn't make me become abusive or, physically or mentally or emotionally. He just made me understand that this wasn't going to get me far in life if I continued this path. And in actual fact, at the age of 21, I was contemplating suicide. So a lot was going on when I first met him. And, I'd never been exposed to the world. I was secluded from everywhere. It was like he opened Pandora's box, and lo and behold, it wasn't, sunshine and rainbows. It was actually the opposite. I didn't know what life was. Here I am at the age of 30 years old, and I had no idea about life. So absolutely, to this day, he still plays a major role in my life.
He's one of your angels.
He is my angel. Like his surname, De Angeli means the angels of. And as I was explaining, I took his surname. When I say he took his surname, I took his surname from my own business name prior to us even getting married or, becoming, a couple. That's what he was. He is, and he was, and it was quite interesting because I still have a picture to this day where he drew my name with feathers of angels all around it. And he has no idea why he did that. Yet he had no idea that I took the name for my company, the Angels of Grace. So you do meet people in your life for a reason, some for a season, but some for long term. And he's definitely something that I'm connected to on a spiritual level for sure.
So now we've set things up so people get an idea of what's coming. I'd like to talk about your mom now. Could you please tell us your mom's name?
Absolutely.
So we have a reference.
Yeah, my mom's name was Rosa. So, so my mum, as I said, she was born in a family of 9 children. She came from down south of Italy. She migrated to Australia when she was 15 years old. Yeah.
And what made her stay with an abusive man?
A lot of people don't understand the cultures. See, I'm not sure if it happened in America. When a lot of Italians came out to Australia, what they did is they brought what we call the old Italy, the cultures, the respect, the integrity, the morals, and everything else of an old Italy. Had they gone back, 20 years later or 30 years later, they would have seen it was completely changed. So in that culture, you marry, you don't divorce. So my father, his name was Alfredo. He came from a background that wasn't pretty either. He lost both his parents when he was 5 years old, and he was pretty much orphaned most of his life. And he was sent from house to house to house where he, copped a lot of abuse. He copped a lot of physical abuse. People would beat him and things like that. So I guess when you look at that and you sort of go, well, he did the best he could with what he had. My mother didn't come from an abusive family, but she came from a very stern family where once you make your bed, you lay in it. So why did she stay with an abusive husband? I believe, without a doubt, my mother stayed because the options were you either stay or you die. And what I mean by you die, again, this is my father who, I speak openly about this because it's not an open wound, it's a scar. My father was very much a threatening man. So he would threaten you. You leave the house, I'll kill you. You walk out of this house, I'll kill you. You think you're going to leave me one day, I'll kill you. So even though they were words, they were very much ingrained into my mother's head. So that's why my mother never, she never left. She had, and I know it sounds horrible when I say this, but had my mother passed away after my father, she would have lived a fulfilled life. But my mother didn't live a fulfilled life. My mother lived a secluded life. She was secluded by her family in the sense my father wouldn't allow her to visit family. He was always, your family doesn't know what's best for you. He was sort of like, when I think back about it, you could call him a narcissist in a way. It was all about him and what he wanted. So you can understand where my mother didn't, she was a woman who wanted to do the right thing. She wanted, Rosa wanted to do the right thing by her culture, by her family. She wanted to be a respectful mother. She wanted to be a respectful wife. So she did whatever she felt was necessary. And if it meant that her children were abused and she couldn't talk up, that was one of them, because she feared her own life as well.
Okay, so wait, I want you to, there's a lot. There's a couple of things. And I know this is a very difficult, complicated discussion, but for anyone who's listening and is in a similar situation to your mom, I believe that you have options. One has options to get out of this relationship.
And I agree with you in today's time.
Yeah, I totally, just so we're clear on if anyone out there is listening.
Absolutely.
I do not condone this type of abusive behavior. it is not okay to stay in an abusive relationship. And again, that's easy for me to say because I'm not the one, the victim.
Mm-hmm.
But for a mother to watch her, do you have siblings?
Yes, I do. I have 3 sisters, 2 older, 1 younger.
Were you all abused?
Pretty much, no, myself and my younger sister the most.
That must have been very painful for your mother to see that and to watch it.
Mm-hmm.
And she never protected you guys?
No, because and I agree with you. Yes, in today's day, you know, it's so much options. But back then, this is a woman who, you know, both my parents were pensioners, which is, where you don't work. You get Social Security money, how you would say in America. So she's someone who thinks if I leave my husband with the children, he'll either kill me or I'll end up homeless and things like that. So that is why her options weren't. She believed in those options. She believed that there was no other choice. Why she would stay and watch us, it's not because she wanted to, it's because if the moment she would bark up herself, the moment she would step up for us, she would also be a victim of abuse as well. You know, I watched my father beat my mother as well, you know, to the point where she wanted to commit suicide so many times herself. But, you know, the thing is, it was a very controlling relationship. And I know for someone outside thinks, oh, you know, hell no, if he lifted his hands once, yeah, absolutely. My husband ever lifted a hand once, that would have been 2 times, the first and last time. But, you know, we're talking about someone who this was the norm back then, you know, and this is why she didn't.
This is all she knew.
Yeah, absolutely. She did the best she could with what she had. And that were her options at the time.
May I ask, your youngest sister, is she in a healthy relationship?
My younger sister is in a healthy. I'll say that again. My younger sister is in a healthy relationship. But having said that, my younger sister suffers a lot of anger. And as much as she doesn't want to bring it into her relationship, she's being told by her partner she's been told by her partner that many times that she has to get help because of her anger. So she holds a lot of anger towards my parents, a lot of anger. Whereas I've done a lot of healing, like so much healing, and there's still more to go, but I've done a lot of healing. So I don't have any anger towards them like she does. Yeah.
So your mom was very good at keeping a good house and making sure the meals were prepared and on time and everything was in order, so your dad wouldn't have a reason to get angry.
You know, you say that and it brings back so many memories because exactly what you just said. She would do everything by the books. She would prepare the meals. She would make sure her house was in order. She would make sure that everything was spotless and clean and he didn't need anything. Yet the moment you said that, making the meals, there were many times, and I say this many, many times where, God forbid, if there was not enough salt or if the food was a little bit too hot, my father would make the whole table turn upside down after my mother just finished cooking. So he was he would take the whole food and throw it out in the garden after she spent hours cooking because there wasn't enough salt or it was too hot or it was too cold. It wasn't right for him. So that's what she had to put up with as well. Absolutely.
She was on her tiptoes all the time, sneaking around, making in fear.
Mm-hmm,
wow.
Mm-hmm.
And they were married for how long?
They were married. Okay, you got me there.
Or how old were they married? How old were they when they got married?
When they got married, my mum was the age of 22 years old. So, and then my mother passed away at the age of 69. Okay. 68. So my mother was 68 when she passed away. So we're talking 46 years at that stage that they were married.
I know that based on what you wrote to me, you said that you've forgiven both of your parents. Is that correct? Because you've been able to move on.
Absolutely.
So what is something you would say to your mom today? What, if she was here?
I would definitely say to my mum, I loved you unconditionally. And I understand what you were going through, and you're very brave. You're very brave because, excuse me, you're very brave because you managed to still raise 4 children, and you're an amazing woman, because that takes strength, because not once, even though you did want to take your life, you never did, because you knew the consequences of leaving us behind. You knew that our father would probably have killed us had you left us, because he didn't want to be burdened with 4 children, knowing that his wife shamelessly took her own life. So I would have said to her, thank you for having so much courage, so much patience, to endure what you did. You were a lot stronger and a lot wiser that you let on. Absolutely.
This is tough stuff. Like you said, it isn't always just so easy to run away, to get out. And it took a lot for her to stay there, as traditional as it was and all that. And it wasn't the norm to get up and leave. Like you say, it wasn't easy for her either.
And when I look back on that, my mother did die of uterine cancer. She had breast cancer and uterine. Within 12 months, she was diagnosed with both. So we don't know which came first, but most likely uterine cancer. And when my mother passed away, and I know this is going to sound horrible to the viewers, and I really want you to understand what I mean by this. My mother gave up living because she must have thought, oh, do I want to live another 20 years with an abusive man? No, I'm going to check out. So that's why she gave up at the end. I truly, truly believe, had my mother been diagnosed with uterine cancer or breast cancer today after my father passed away, it would have been totally different. She would have held on. She would have fought hard. But the thing was, why it's like, and I want people to understand where I'm coming from. This is obviously my opinion and her daughter, but why go through one sickness only to get better and live in another sickness for the rest of your life? That's how I see that.
As you said, if your father had already passed, then she would have perhaps, hopefully fought really hard to stay alive so she could have a good life with her children.
Absolutely.
Had your dad
absolutely
passed.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate that she
didn't
get that opportunity. Oh, but I believe that she's free. She's free now, and she's
Absolutely.
very close by.
Yes. Oh, always, always. When I got diagnosed myself, I knew that moment. I was diagnosed with cancer. I knew it was my mother who allowed me to get diagnosed early. I knew, she would have been, nah, you need to go and get checked ASAP, Grace. I'm not having this to you. What I mean by that, she didn't want me to have it, but it's like she warned me, and I believe she still is with me. But those moments when I got told those 3 words, you have cancer, I remember the first thing I said was, I'm so sorry, Mum, because I knew it would have broken her heart. She would have done anything and everything. And she did, to the point when she was in palliative care, she begged the doctors to take a blood test to make sure that we weren't into the BRCA, it wasn't genetic.
So it passed down to all the children.
Correct. Yeah.
So how is it, may I ask, that you are so different from your mom in a way? Or could you please explain your similarities and your differences?
Well, I am very much like my mother, in the sense, if you look at my body type, if you look at my features and everything, even to my nails and my feet, I have everything of my mother. So growing up, seeing what she went through, and people saying to me, you're going to be exactly like your mother, that was my wake up call. It's like, oh no, I'm not going to be like my mother. So that's what made me realize that I ain't going to be like her. I'm not going to be in I would rather be alone than in a relationship with an abusive man. I'd rather have nothing than everything and be miserable in my life. So it's not that I didn't want to be her. I wanted all her good qualities, which I got. I'm a very loving person. I always, put on meals and prepare for people. I love doing that. That's how I find happiness and love, by expressing my love through food, through gatherings, things like that. So I took all of that from her. I took her morals, as well. But what I realized is if I went down the same path as my mother did, I would be sick and I would die from a disease like she did. So that's when I thought, I can't have these qualities that you have, Mum. I have to change. I have to start looking after myself. My mother wasn't one that would exercise or, eat properly, things like that. She wasn't overly obese, but she wasn't slim either. Whereas I'm not obese, but I'm not slim, but I'm healthy. I look after myself. I go and dive into the ocean at 6 o'clock in the morning when it's freezing cold.
Wow,
I do all
good
of
for
these
you.
things. Yeah. Yeah. But you know what I mean? And it takes all of this stuff to do, but it's my way of healing my mind, my spirit. So I knew that my mother never did that, because we're talking about someone who was born in the 40s, what would they know about your spirituality and things like that and your emotions? They were told to suppress all of that. So I knew the moment my mother passed away, I remember turning to my husband and I said, I will never, ever be like my mother. And that was the moment I changed my life myself. And I thought, no way, I'm not going out like she did, where she was miserable to the end. She was miserable. When I say miserable, she was sad. She was so hurt that she was let down by her husband that I thought, I don't want that. So that's when I started to heal myself. As much as I want to, it's their fault. I don't blame my parents. I actually thank my parents for who I am today. It's made me the strong woman I am today. It's made me sit up straight and take notice when things aren't right. Things like that, And I remember once I moved out of home and my mother had passed away, I remember sitting opposite from my father and thinking, you can't hurt me now. You can't do anything to me now. You can't hurt Mum and you can't hurt me anymore. So that was the biggest lesson, is I knew that I took so much from her. I do. I look, like I always say to my sisters, just look down at your hands. Mum is always with you. I look at my hands and I know she's part of me. But I know that I wasn't going to get the abusive side from that. I knew I was going to get her strength. I was going to live through her strength that she had, through her courage. And that's what I've done. So
I think
that was the biggest lesson.
Miraculous how you have transitioned, because it doesn't always turn out that way. She sounds remarkable, and it's so unfortunate that she never had, in this lifetime, that she didn't have the opportunity to really blossom and grow and be happy. And did she ever have music on? Did she love art other than cooking and the fear for your dad? Did she ever celebrate life?
Very, very rarely. It's really sad, because when Mum passed away, to find a photo of my mother smiling was really, really hard. That's the honest truth. So she hardly celebrated, but she loved music. My mother was I'm not sure what you call the proper term, but someone who sews clothing for companies. And she would be out in her little room sewing, and she would love her daytime TV, love her Young and the Restless and Days of Our Lives.
Soap opera.
Yes. Yes, she loved them. She would sit out, and my mother loved coffee. When I say my mother loved coffee, I think when my mother passed away, some manufacturer lost a lot of money, because my mum was supporting them, because she loved her coffee. So she would always sit there and she would tell us to put on her TV, and she'd be, put up the volume, because obviously the sewing machine was loud. And she would be like, and then you would watch her through the kitchen window, and there she is, just paralyzed, watching, the Young and the Restless or one of those shows, going, I can't believe that just happened, and us
I love
being
that
children,
thought.
we never understood it. We're like, what is she talking about? It's like we looked at it like TV show, but my mother was like, this is life and death. This is what's going to happen to this poor girl. So they were beautiful. They were beautiful. They were the beautiful moments and things like that. And I guess my mother told me she loved me 5 years before she passed. So that was the first time my mother ever said the words, I love you.
Wow. Really?
And yes.
Why do you think that is?
Because she was diagnosed with cancer at the time.
But your whole life, she never told you?
My whole life, never. Never.
I'm sorry.
And I remember feeling, part of me felt resented. Like part of me felt like, oh, what you're telling me now? But this is the magic of having someone in your corner. And what I mean by that is I remember my husband Rodolfo said to me, Grace, I need you, the moment she was diagnosed, he said, I need you to look at this. Don't turn your face. You need to look at this. And I remember everything she would say to me, I cherished.
I guess that's everything. All that matters, right? It doesn't matter the past. She said it.
Correct.
You heard it from her. That's an absolute gift. That is a gift.
Yep, absolutely.
Doesn't
and
matter.
I spent, And, I used to travel 4 hours with her a day when she would do radiation for 15 minutes. And those 4 hours for months, we're talking almost 6 months, if not probably 8, they were priceless. They were priceless. I would not swap anything for those moments, because that was when I was really, even though my father was in the car and we couldn't really talk, but they were the moments that I really cherished with my mother. They were the moments that I had where I knew that we're going to be okay. And that is why when she passed, I had no resentment. I had nothing unsaid. I was clear as the day, I had everything.
That's wonderful that you had that time together. That's magical. Yes. That's great.
Yeah.
Grace to Angeli. You made my day. I had a rough day. You really made my day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Your podcast, Breast Cancer Hero's Journey, you talk about the most magnificent things, optimism, the spirituality, the spiritual side of things, the positive brain. You got to get your brain in the right place. You discuss Western medicine and Eastern alternative treatments and therapies. I think it's mind-body has to be aligned in the right place in order to heal.
Absolutely. And that's why that is one thing I advocate so much. I always say to people, it doesn't matter where you are in your journey. You could be first stage, you could be, stage 4, stage 1. You need to get things right within your soul. You need to get things right into your spirit, because once you have put everything in place, you are your most authentic self. I say it all the time. When you become your most authentic self and you are honest and you are liberated within yourself, it doesn't matter what happens next. Because like I say to people, we don't know when our contract ends. We could all go through breast cancer and survive it, and 25 years later get hit by a bus, 4 days later get hit by a train. God. We have no idea. So I always say to people, don't look at it as a death sentence. Look at it as a way to heal yourself. So I forgave myself first, and then I forgave my parents. And this is why I'm able to speak about this today. And like I always say, if it's still an open wound, heal it. When it's a scar, you can talk about until the cows come home. Nothing changes. So that's the one thing I advocate to a lot of women is be your authentic self. Love yourself so much. So much.
Thank you, Grace D'Angeli. Australia is ringing and shouting with joy, and we've come all the way across the seas to America and India and Europe and all over, that this podcast is reaching out to people and talking and sharing stories of the role their mother played in their life. Thank you for joining me on Should Have Listened to My Mother.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for your podcast as well, because it's really important how we take so much from our mothers. They obviously have the most important role in our lives. So I appreciate your podcast, and I appreciate your listeners listening in to your podcast. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. We'll be in touch soon. Grace to Angeli, your name is beautiful. I could say it 100 times. I'm Jackie Tantillo, and we will be back next week with another episode of Should Have Listened to My Mother.